Hello, I'm Pete Dichter with this edition of Impact North America from Rome, our studios in Rome. And today, pleased to have Father Paul Kramer on board with us. And Father is an acclaimed author, written several books on the mission of Fatima, on Masonry. Also, 3 degrees in theology, in philosophy, and a Master of Divinity. Thank you so much for taking time, Father, and coming to talk with us today.
Well, it's great to be here, Peter.
All right, we see some interesting situations in the church now. Of course, we just had the recent resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. And in your opinion, what's behind this resignation?
Well, the Pope stated quite clearly that he is weakening, his health is deteriorating. He doesn't feel like he's capable of governing the church any longer. And so I think that is his principal reason, and I think from the reports I'm getting from inside sources, his health is truly deteriorating. So he thinks for the good of the church, he had to step down.
Now, do you think there was other influences that involved in that decision?
I would think so, because already 3 years ago, he had it on his mind to resign. I have heard reports that he was not really pleased with having to be so much involved in administration and government. It was difficult. There are factions in the church, and having to deal with opposition is something that, at his age, he was finding difficult. And so he visited the tomb of Pope St. Celestine V in April, about 3 years ago, and he removed the pallium, which is the sign of his power as Bishop of Rome, and he removed it from his shoulders and placed it on the tomb of St. Celestine and left it there. Now, the significance of that is that Pope St. Celestine V was the Pope who voluntarily resigned of his own volition, not being in any way coerced or pressured by others.
Now, you talk about other factions. What kind of factions would be involved in making a decision like this? And obviously, it's been ongoing for a while.
I've heard about it for a long time from people in high positions in the Vatican. I can even mention the names of some. There was a Monsignor Zanoni. There was Monsignor Mario Marini, who was the late secretary of the Ecclesia Dei Commission. And they spoke of ecclesiastical Freemasonry, the Masonic party in the church and in the Holy See. And those who are faithful to the magisterium of the church, to the traditional teaching of the church, the traditional discipline of the church, they were up against reformists who were known to be generally of the progressive wing, but also among the so-called conservatives. There were among that group in positions of power. So that would be primarily the force that the Pope would have been at issue with, struggling with, in order to govern the church according to his conscience, according to the teaching of Christ. Whereas you have this group who have their own agenda, their own Masonic agenda that they promote in the church. And that is the point of conflict.
Okay, so now we talk about Masons. A lot of people don't really understand what a Mason is. Is it a business club, a gentleman's club?
It has that appearance. They'd like to present themselves that way. But below that surface, there is an agenda that they have announced for centuries. Since the 1700s, they have made it very clear that they are working to establish in the world a global one-world government, a world republic, and a one-world religion that gets all the religions, Christian and non-Christian, and blend them all together under one organizational umbrella.
So if I was to walk down the street, how would I recognize a Mason? Is it somebody that sits behind the club? How do you recognize a Mason? Are they all over the world?
They're all over the world. Sometimes they will wear a Masonic badge, or they'll have the insignia on their car. But other times, if they don't want you to know, you have no way of knowing unless you exchange their private handshake, by which a Mason identifies himself to a brother Mason. Just like the early Christians would, with the cryptic symbolism, would draw the symbol of the fish in the sand, signifying with a secret signal that to the one to the other, recognizing each other as Christians. Well, Masons have their own secret signals for communicating to each other that they're Masons, or they have their distress signal when a Mason is in court and he wants some extra help from the judge that is perhaps not entirely within the letter of the law. He'll give a Masonic distress signal, and more often than not, he'll be let off.
So if you look at Masons, in the church, of course, I mean, the head of the church is Christ. If we're looking at the Masonic order, who leads them? Who do they follow?
This is the thing about Freemasonry. They have unknown patriarchs. They have an unknown patriarch. They have the Supreme Councils, and their names are not published to the Masons beneath them. From the highest degrees, orders are given to those of lower degrees, which they must obey. And after you reach a certain degree in Freemasonry, you must obey under penalty of death. So you've got no appeal, and you simply must carry out your orders, do what you're told, or else you pay the penalty. And also you have to maintain the Masonic secrets. The secrets of the order are internal, and there is a death penalty for those who reveal the secrets of the order.
And of course, it's called, in reality, the Masonic Temple, correct? They are going to the Masonic Temple.
That's right. Because Freemasonry is a religion. Even though they don't like to say that they're a religion, I can recall in the document of excommunication, I believe it was the excommunication of the Grand Lodge of Uruguay, it is stated in the decree from the Mother Lodge of England that Freemasonry is a religion. Now, the religion of Freemasonry is the so-called ancient mysteries, which is the pagan, the systematic pagan mystery religions of the ancient times that have been woven together in this modern organization that we call Freemasonry.
So, I mean, we talk about Shriners. Shriners are Masons.
Yes.
At what level would a Shriner be? We're talking about Masons that are clowns, they're in parades, you see them all over the place. At what level would they be?
They, at least, they are at a high degree of, for example, they have to either have completed the 6th degree of the York Rite or the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite to be a Shriner. But that's not to say that that's the highest degree of Masonry. There are much higher degrees than that. But what is generally known to the public, that's usually as high as you're going to get for ordinary Masons. And then at that level, they qualify to become Shriners. But even though they may clown around in public, their religion is not clownery. As St. Paul says, and as the Psalms tell us, the gods of the pagans are devils, and the gods of the Freemasons are devils.
So you take this group, why do they want to destroy the church? What's their motive?
Their motive is that they serve the devil, and therefore, as they openly said, and I quote in my book, The Mystery of Iniquity, you will find the quotations where they proclaim that they march under the standards of Satan. So they willingly do the work of the devil. Not all of them, as one Grand Master points out. Only 90% of Freemasons do not really know what Masonry is about. That was quoted by that Grand Master was quoted by Father Adler in his book, The Anti-Christian Revolution of Freemasonry. So that other 10%, though, they know exactly what they are about. Gaining positions of power in the church in order to subvert and destroy the church, gaining positions of power in the governments of the nation states in order to subvert them, destroy the sovereign state, and create a one-world republic, a one-world government, and a one-world Masonic religion that diverts the worship and devotion away from God and enthrones Satan. How
do they infiltrate? I mean, obviously they must be within the Vatican walls. how do they infiltrate the church?
They cultivate relationships with young prelates and young priests who are, when they're hired to work in the Vatican, or even before they're hired to work in the Vatican, when they see that a man is destined for high places in the church, they begin already to cultivate relationships with these men. They introduce them to people who are the movers and shakers. They take them to diplomatic cocktail parties and gatherings. They give them money so that they can have an ample bank account, and they promote their career among others that, in the church hierarchy with whom they have influence. And in this manner, they're able to promote the careers of these men, and at a certain point, they will be invited to join Freemasonry, where they will, they can rise to the top, they can move to very high positions, or else, if at that point the man declines and he doesn't want to become a Mason, then no more money, no more connections with powerful people. You're going to be simply reverting back to what you were when you first met these people, and your career is not going to move forward unless without an act of God.
So this has been a very patient and conscious movement. I'm curious as to why somebody who's being brought through the seminary as a young priest isn't aware of Masonry and isn't aware of what's happening to him.
These are secret societies, and they don't advertise their agenda that much. The devil likes to be secretive, and so do his followers. So you have, for example, already in the 1820s, the Masonic association called the Alta Vendita, I think that's what they called themselves, and they reported to their leader that their propagandizing the clergy was fantastically successful in planting the Masonic ideas into the minds of the young clergy. And their agenda was, let them think that they're marching under the standards of the keys of Peter, whereas in fact they will be marching under our standards. And St. Maximilian Kolbe in 1917, on the second centenary celebration of Freemasonry, he saw them in their parade in Rome with placards saying, "Satan will rule from the Vatican. The Pope will be his slave." And this brings us back to that struggle that the Pope has, that struggle against Freemasonry. Freemasonry attempts to dominate the Pope, coerce the Pope, enslave the Pope into making their policies become the official policies of the Church.
So if we look at the infiltration, obviously it's at a high level. Would they have some involvement in the killing of John Paul I back in 1978?
Well, I can tell you, men of rather high rank have discussed precisely this point. I recall, like I mentioned earlier, the name of Monsignor Mario Marini. He was a close friend of Cardinal Edouard Gagnon. Cardinal Palazzini, Cardinal Gagnon, Monsignor Marini, and I, we were all common friends. We all knew each other. And I heard of the conversation 3 days before the death of John Paul I. He was still an archbishop. Edouard Gagnon said to Marini, "They're going to kill this Pope. He's trying to make too many changes, and he's trying to do it too quickly." 3 days later, Marini called Archbishop Gagnon, and he said, "Your Excellency, do you remember what you told me 3 days ago?" And he said, "I remember very well," and they did it. Now, I've done a great deal of research, and not only from books and articles, but also from inside Vatican sources that confirm what I have read in published sources. So the picture emerges very clear in my mind. I already found out, I already learned that Pope John Paul I intended to remove Bishop Paul Marcinkus as the president of the Vatican Bank. And the Vatican Bank, of course, at that time was very much a chief stockholder and very much involved, connected with the Banco Ambrosiano of Roberto Calvi. And they would lose the support and the access to funds that they were getting from the Vatican if Marcinkus were removed, because Marcinkus moved very much in the Masonic circles. He was a suspected Freemason. There is some evidence that he, in fact, was a Freemason. He was close to Calvi, and Calvi was a member of the P2 Masonic Lodge. Calvi was a protege of Michele Sindona, who caused the first banking scandal in the Vatican with the collapse of the Franco National Bank of Long Island. So Calvi was the protege of Sindona, and Sindona had been a member of the P2 Masonic Lodge. They were both under Licio Gelli's Masonic Lodge. So they were in a state of panic when Pope John Paul I made it known that Bishop Paul Marcinkus was going to be removed. It was the night that he died, in fact. He had a heated discussion with Cardinal Jean Villot. And he mentioned that Villot was going to be removed as the Secretary of State. And the Villot family, from father to son, had for generations been Freemasons. And there is plenty of evidence to suggest that the Cardinal himself was a Freemason. Villot was going to be removed. Others suspected of Freemasonic ties were going to be removed. But the clincher was that Bishop Paul Marcinkus was going to be removed. And at that point, they were in a state of panic, and they had to act quickly.
So he was a key player, obviously.
Yes. So, and he also had made it known he was going to consecrate Russia. Pope John Paul I, and I've seen the documentation, that he did in fact make statements to the effect that he was intending to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, as Our Lady of Fatima had requested. He died quite suddenly. They put out rumors about having a heart condition. No, he was in very good health. There was no truth to that at all.
So the P2 obviously still exists today,
yes,
in your estimation?
And the connection again with the death of Roberto Calvi, because Calvi got into difficulty when there was the disappearance of, I don't remember the exact figure, I've heard of 1.4 billion, other times I've heard a little bit, even a little more than that, had disappeared from the Banco Ambrosiano. And Calvi was under indictment, and he did not want to fall alone. If he was going to be made to be the one to take the fall, he was going to take others down with him. So Licio Gelli, the venerable master of the P2, a convicted terrorist, he financed terrorist operations. He was convicted of financing terrorist operations, suspected of involvement in the death of the former Prime Minister Aldo Moro, because there is a connection there. Henry Kissinger, of course, made the threat to Aldo Moro. Aldo Moro refused to, as Prime Minister, refused to engage the government in a policy of population reduction and deindustrialization. And Kissinger said to him, "You will pay dearly for this." Kissinger was a friend and associate of Licio Gelli. In fact, Gelli himself mentioned in a 1982 interview that when his daughter was married, at the reception at the wedding reception at his mansion in Arezzo, one of the guests present was Henry Kissinger. Now, it was the Red Brigades who actually carried out the assassination. But it has emerged in the intervening decades, the evidence that Gelli had a great influence over the Red Brigades. So here we see the clear connection between Kissinger, Licio Gelli of P2, and Roberto Calvi. Now, the connection with John Paul I is this. But since Roberto Calvi was in a desperate situation, he needed money. He needed like $1.4 billion, and he needed it fast to get out of hot water and to be able to make this indictment go away. So Gelli finally communicated to him that the Vatican has a slush fund, and they can get the money to him, but he's got to complete some formalities, and he'd have to go to London for that. Of course, the formalities were in fact the plans for his almost a ritual execution. He was found hanging at the Blackfriars Bridge, and the reason why he was killed. Gelli was a master blackmailer, but in desperate times, people resort to desperate measures. And Calvi was blackmailing the master blackmailer. The threat was, if you don't come up with this money, I will blow the whistle on the P2 involvement in the killing of Pope John Paul I. And in making this threat to the venerable master of the P2 Lodge, Licio Gelli, friend of Henry Kissinger, also an acquaintance of David Rockefeller, Calvi was getting out of his depth, and he paid with his life.
Father, obviously the control of the Masons in the Vatican is pretty extreme, and I guess they would even have in controlling cardinals, they would have control in elections as well, correct? Quickly, if you can.
Well, again, it depends on. Pope Benedict has made a number of cardinals that I'm very pleased with. I think by and large, the cardinals of Pope Benedict are a cut above those of Pope John Paul II. So the conclave that elected Joseph Ratzinger, I think, can even be improved upon with God's help, with the help of God's grace, in this coming election. But in the government of the Church, I can only tell you this much. I'll give you a quotation to show you just how pervasive is their power in the Vatican. Whereas Monsignor Mario Marini told me in 2008, he said, our hands are tied, and he makes this gesture. Our hands are tied. We can do nothing because it is Freemasons who control the key positions in the Vatican. Okay. And then a few months before he died, in 2008, October 2008, he died in May of 2009, Marini told me again, we are under Masonic occupation.
Okay, Father. A lot of this is in your book, Mystery of Iniquity, which has just come out, which we can get at Fatima.org. If they go to Fatima.org, you'll be able to pick up any of Father's books and get a lot more information. Father, thank you so much for being a part of our show today. And God bless you all. And thank you for watching another edition of Impact North America. I'm Pete Dichter. Hi, I'm Pete Dichter, and welcome to another edition of Impact North America. Special times in Rome, and we are in our Rome studios today, speaking with Father Paul Kramer, who is an expert researcher in Fatima, and also an author. You have many degrees to your name, and also studied and researched Masonic movement in the Vatican and around the world with the New World Order. In recapping our last show, we talked about the situation with Benedict the 16th, and you had mentioned that you believed, in fact, that he was having health problems, but there was also other factors that you had mentioned that could have been a possibility in his decision to step down.
Freemasonry has always made no secret that it intends to infiltrate the church, to take over from within, to corrupt and destroy the church from within. That is their agenda. And the Pope has to struggle against that program. So it's something that a man who is in the waning energies of his life is not really at the level of being able to combat such a thing. They intend the program of Freemasonry is to worship the devil, to remove Christ from his throne and put Satan in his place. And so you have this eternal enmity between the Church of Jesus Christ and the Church of Heresy, what they call themselves, the other church, the counter-church, the anti-church, as the Masons define themselves. And they have infiltrated into the Vatican. They have been there for a long time. Pope Benedict, without mentioning the name Freemasonry, did make a statement some years ago to the effect that they are truly entrenched. So he wants to give, it would appear, when he says for the good of the church that he's resigning, it really will give the church the opportunity to create that opening, the opportunity for God, for the grace of God to intervene in the affairs of the church and to place on the throne of Peter a pope who will be able to energetically combat this most mortal of all enemies of the church and of the human race.
So if you're looking at this pope, in the beginning in his papacy, he initially wasn't all that interested in the Fatima message and what it had to say. But it appears as he moved towards the end that he actually, in fact, did understand that it wasn't completed. And I think possibly you'd say that that is part of the decision of why he stepped down, to make way for a pope who may have the ability to make that happen.
I remember back in 1985, as Cardinal Ratzinger, in a private conversation, he had stated quite explicitly that the consecration of Russia had not been done, and that was in reference specifically to the 1984, March 25th, 1984 consecration of the world performed by Pope John Paul II. Then the Vatican's party line under Cardinal Casaroli in 1989 emphasized that the party line was now that everyone must say that the consecration has been done. When Pope Benedict was elected, he seemed not too interested in the question, but as the years of his pontificate progressed, he became more and more convinced of the importance of Fatima. I was speaking with one of the cardinals of the Curia in Rome, who told me the name of an archbishop who, inside the Vatican, this is an internal commission, an ad hoc commission, was set up by the authority of Pope Benedict to examine the question of the consecration of Russia. And more recently, I have heard from those who are in contact with people very close to the Pope, that Pope Benedict is very much more thinking now seriously about the consecration of Russia and the message of Fatima. He seems to have gravitated much more toward the position that the business of Fatima is unfinished and it's very urgent and it's got to be dealt with.
So that it was a conscious thought, in fact, to help move that forward, in your opinion, then?
He wants to give God's grace the opportunity to intervene a pope who will have the energy to combat the evil forces that have infiltrated in the church, the Masonic, the ecclesiastical Freemasonry, one who will have enough strength and energy to resist them and to bring about Our Lady's request.
You know, when looking at the Bible and Bible prophecy, the Word of God is written, it's said, it's stated, it's up front. And, you know, when you know the closure for the devil is coming in the end times, for me, and I guess for people out there, it's hard to understand. Why would people in the position they are in the Vatican who understand God, who understand the message of God, the Word of God, the message of Fatima, why would they allow this to happen? Why would people who have that kind of education allow it to take over in the Vatican?
We must never forget one of the principal effects of original sin was the darkening of the intellect. And so the intellect is prone to having these kind of blind spots. And sometimes it's the most learned of men who do not see the proverbial elephant in the living room. And I have spoken with cardinals and bishops in the Vatican, about 40 of them that I've personally spoken with. And some of them do take very seriously the message of Our Lady and the need for the consecration of Russia. One archbishop said to me, "You've opened many windows for me." Others have taken it very seriously. But then there were some who resist it, who just don't think it's important at all. So it's a question of divine grace, and those who are open to divine grace and cooperate with divine grace who can see it. Others don't want to see it, and they won't see it because they have their eyes wide shut.
So if we look at the positive message of Fatima and what it promises, which is peace, and I guess maybe it's in the words, consecration. I mean, this is not a difficult thing we're talking about here. I mean, what in fact is a consecration? And what does it take? How long does it take?
The act of consecration is to set apart and dedicate to God by a solemn and public act. So the consecration can be performed in 5 minutes' time. A prayer. It's a prayer, but it's a solemn and public prayer. The Pope and the bishops just need to synchronize so that it will be on the same day. It doesn't have to be at precisely the same moment, but on the same day, the Pope and all the bishops of the world in their cathedrals will make the public and solemn act of consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And Our Lady promised that there will be peace given to the whole world. There will be the conversion of Russia. There will be that God will save Russia by this means, convert and save Russia, and give peace to the whole world.
Why Russia?
Russia is at the center of the geopolitical pressure cooker. When Our Lady Fatima spoke of the errors of Russia, and that Russia would spread its errors throughout the whole world, people all too often understood this in a very historically circumscribed manner. And because of that, it was as if there was something wrong with Russia, as if there was something bad about the Russian people, and it began to have this taint of being considered unfriendly to Russia, whereas quite the opposite. As Pope Pius XI even pointed out, these errors of Russia, which are the errors of communism, were imported. They were imported into Russia by people mainly of a non-Russian ethnicity from London and New York, and from Germany and Switzerland, and they brought this doctrine into Russia. They overthrew Russia, created a Soviet Union that had the program of annihilating the various sovereign states and amalgamating all into a one global government, which is identical to the plan of Freemasonry. So the consecration. So you've had these energies being focused first on Russia. That's where that revolution began. It's a continuation, in fact, of the same movement that was of the French Revolution, but it really got its momentum in the 20th century with the communist revolution in Russia. And so the perverse designs to destroy the Catholic faith, to destroy good government, and put Satan in control of church and of world government, it began in Russia and set up his headquarters in Moscow under the Communist Party. And even though Russia is no longer communist, it's a constitutional federated republic now. As I pointed out to an archbishop, the powers that created communism are still very much active. It is the most financially powerful organizations in the world. If you read the quotation of Father Pedro Arrupe in the cover of my book, The Mystery of Iniquity, he explains how all the public institutions in the governments of the world, in education, in media, in press, they're all in the hands of these godless, highly organized, godless people. That's where the errors of Russia had their origin. They were imported into Russia. They were established in Russia. Moscow became the headquarters of this godless movement. And they still they still are very much hostile toward Russia. You see the plan for the encirclement of Russia and the conquest of Russia in the policy documents of the American government. Whether of the Democratic Party, you see this elaborated by Zbigniew Brzezinski, or in the Republican Party, in the documents of the Project for the New American Century. They both speak of a unipolar, full-spectrum dominance, a global dominance of the Western powers of the United States and the British over the whole world. And to obtain this, they must first exert a total full-spectrum dominance over the Eurasian landmass, which means Russia and China. So this policy objective is very threatening, directly threatening Russia. And Freemasonry thereby would provoke a major war, a war between the NATO forces, the United States and its allies, with Russia and its allies in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That would be a catastrophic war, and it would result in a catastrophic defeat of the United States. But in the end, it would bring about the destruction of Russia. And there are even allusions to that in the eschatological scriptures, passages of scripture, that the Chinese, with their global ambitions to dominate the world, would eventually be the third party that would benefit from a war between the United States and Russia, because China would conserve its powers, and rather than become subservient to another country, they would invade and attack Russia before they would ever let Russia dominate the whole world. As Confucius wrote, just as there are not two suns in the sky, so there can only be one emperor on earth. So you have various powers, global powers, who are contending for global dominance. And that inevitably and inescapably leads to global conflict, to world war, and the catastrophic loss of life, the annihilation of nations, and in the aftermath, the setting up of a global, godless, Masonic empire with the plan to exterminate more than 90% of the human race and create a new race, a new master race of godless worshippers of the devil.
What would the purpose be of reducing the population? Why wouldn't you just make them simply your slaves?
They don't need that many slaves. They consider the vast majority, they use the term useless eaters. The vast majority of humans for them are useless eaters. They want about 500 million slaves. This is in their documents, and I quote some of the documents in my book. So I'm not making this up. It sounds incredible, but again, this was the agenda of Hitler. I do not understand why some people find it so hard to believe that this is the agenda of Freemasonry. When Hitler and the Nazis took this agenda straight from Freemasonry, they made it their own global agenda. So it's not hard to believe at all, because you already had somebody by the name of Adolf Hitler who attempted to bring this about. So that is their agenda. It is the extermination of the human race. They want to create a master race. That's exactly what Hitler wanted to do.
So what they've basically done on a global scale is created misdirection where they're totally in control. And I think probably, too, that misdirection is obviously evident in the Vatican, where people don't know who to follow, don't know what the truth is, don't know whether the scriptures are telling them exactly what they need to know. So when you're sitting there in the Vatican and you're talking about the message of Fatima and you're talking about the consecration, how do you get in there and control the situation where the Masons don't have that opportunity? Is there a way? I mean, do we have a way that we're going to be able to save ourselves? Obviously, scripturally, you're saying no, but is there a way that we can save ourselves?
Yes, the situation we have, I think St. Paul describes it best when he says, no one hearkens to an uncertain bugle. So when you have contrasting messages, conflicting signals coming out of the Vatican, coming out of the See of Peter, that's going to create immense confusion. And this has been going on for almost a half century now. What we need, by the grace of the Holy Ghost, that a pope who is clear-thinking and resolute, who understands the need for the consecration of Russia and for the restoration of the Church's traditions, who will step by step, but quickly, swiftly, and with prudence, bring this about, the consecration of Russia. And I can only say that I was very, very pleased when I read the report that the Patriarch of Moscow, Hilarion, said, let's hope that the new Pope will be a traditionalist. Because they have this Protestantizing ecumenism in the Catholic Church, which has caused so much confusion, the loss of faith in entire nations. The faith has been corrupted in entire nations, in entire continents, by these conflicting, confusing messages. We're the one true faith. There's no salvation outside of the Catholic faith. And on the other hand, all religions are good and they all lead to heaven, all lead to God. When you have one institution that's preaching these two conflicting doctrines, of course it's going to cause a great deal of confusion and loss of faith. And what did it gain for our relations with the Orthodox Church of Russia or the Orthodox churches in general? Well, it didn't gain anything to have all this Protestantizing influence in the reforms of the post-council of Vatican II. Well, it alienated the Orthodox churches because the Orthodox churches, if they're anything, they are traditionalist. Mm-hmm.
So how do you bring the two churches together? I mean, you've got the situation where we've got scandals. How do you handle the scandal? How do you handle the pedophilic situation in the Vatican to bring us all together? Well,
of course, we can't change the past, but we can certainly, with the Pope who will reestablish discipline in the Church, we can prevent the past from happening again. But through the consecration of Russia, as Pope Benedict said, conversion is the returning to God with one's whole heart. And when the Russian nation returns to God with its whole heart, the conversion of Russia, we will have unity between the Church of Russia, a very traditionally minded church, and in the Roman Church. And so, united, this will be a tremendous global force to bring about not only reform in the Church, but throughout all of society, to re-Christianize what has become, unfortunately, a secularized post-Christian world.
So we've got the answer. We've been told the answer to this is obviously the consecration of Russia, the blessing by the Pope and the Cardinals in one ceremony. There's got to be more to it. I mean, is there more to the message? Is there more to the third secret? Can you elaborate on that?
What I can say, like there are those very catastrophic things that are foretold in the third secret, but Our Lady says, if my requests are not heeded, yes, Russia will spread its errors throughout the world. There will be war, there will be persecution, there will be the annihilation of entire nations. And then in the third secret, she gets into the particulars of the horrible weapons of mass destruction that will destroy entire peoples, entire nations. Natural disasters that will be almost as bad as the World War. There will be the dominance of the. It will appear as if the church will be so persecuted that it will appear as if the church doesn't even exist anymore. But it's all in connection with if her requests are not heeded. Our Lady gave the third secret not to frighten us to death, but to frighten us into obedience. Because it's not a message of despair. Our Lady is saying there's a very simple solution. But it can't happen unless the Pope believes in it, and if the bishops will believe enough so that they'll obey the Pope when they're commanded to consecrate Russia. And so that is really what it comes down to. It's always, as it were, it's a question of conversion, it's a question of faith. When in the hierarchy we have enough faith to bring about that conversion, then they will be of one mind, they will consecrate Russia. And when they consecrate Russia, then the grace will be given, but not before.
Do we have the full secret? Has it fully been revealed as we've been told time and time again?
No, it hasn't, because Cardinal Ratzinger, for example, he spoke of some specifics. And he spoke it to more than one individual. And not only Cardinal Ratzinger, but others who have read The Secret have said the same thing. That in the third secret, the great apostasy in the church will begin from the top. And that was spoken by Cardinal Mario Luigi Ciappi, a man who read The Secret. Cardinal Ratzinger spoke of the danger to the faith and to the life of the Christian. Of the last things, meaning the eschatological texts of Scripture, the warnings given by Our Lady in other Marian apparitions, and these points are very specific. Russia will wage war on the entire world. There will be massive destruction, loss of life. Much that has been built by the hands of men will be destroyed. This is the message of Our Lady to Blessed Elena Aiello, beatified by Pope Benedict XVI. The setting up of the counter-church, the counterfeit church, what Our Lady refers to calling it the false church of darkness. So the church will be driven underground, and there will be a false church that will take its place for some time. And this was revealed by Our Lady to Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, beatified by Pope John Paul II. And so, yes, there will be the annihilation of nations if the consecration is not done in time. This is in the third secret. There will be a world war. There will be a new source of energy that can be used for good or for evil, for the great benefit of mankind. But unfortunately, without the consecration of Russia being done in time, it will be used to create the most destructive weapons that will make the nuclear weapons look primitive. So all of these things will be completed, one would expect, before the centenary year of the apparitions in Fatima, because Pope Benedict clued us in on that when he went to Fatima and made the prayer that all should be fulfilled by 2017. And others who have read The Secret have specified more or less that same time frame of the completion of all that is foretold in The Secret of Fatima. And Pope Benedict in Fatima said, Fatima is not over yet. The fulfillment of Fatima has not yet come. He made that very clear when he himself went to Fatima. So Fatima does not pertain to the past, as Cardinal Sodano said. It is not yet fulfilled, as our now emeritus Pope Benedict XVI has stated.
What are the challenges for the new Pope? What's he going to have to do to make this happen? And what's his fight? One
can foresee that there's going to be a rebellion And this has been foretold by Our Lady to Blessed Ellen Aiello, and to others. Our Lady has revealed this too, for example, to Marie Julie Jaheni, who was highly esteemed by her own bishop in the diocese in France where she lived. The bishops will rebel and set up a counter hierarchy, and there will be a revolution in Italy. A communist revolution will take over, and the Pope will have to flee from Rome. So there will be strong opposition, resistance against a strong Pope. But Our Lady foretold that there will be a Pope who will reverse the policies of the Church at the very last moment, and that will provoke the reaction, the rebellion against the Pope, and the revolution in Italy.
All right, Father, you've written a very extensive book called The Mystery of Iniquity, which explains a lot of the control that is going on in the Vatican, that the Masons are, in fact, controlling more than we would like to believe. And this book is available through the website, fatima.org. So, Father, the book is 20 years, The Mystery of Iniquity. It's taken you 20 years to write. And it was originally designed for the Pope to read, to help him. But you've sent this now, you've come to Rome, you've sent this to the cardinals. How come?
It is important that all of the cardinals have the full perspective on the gravity of the message of Our Lady of Fatima and the urgency to heed her requests. Because with this in mind, the cardinals are going to elect the next Pope. And they must, before God and in their conscience, select a man who will heed the message of Fatima in order to avoid the most terrible consequences that Our Lady reveals in the third secret. That there will be the annihilation of entire nations, there will be world war, there will be massive loss of life, the extermination of more than half of the population of the world. And all of these things will happen if Our Lady's request is not heeded and the consecration of Russia is not done in time. You will have a global, worldwide, bloody persecution of the Church, where the Church will be driven into the catacombs, and it will appear as if the Church had disappeared from the face of the earth. Unless Our Lady is taken seriously, and unless a Pope is elected who will heed Our Lady's message and consecrate Russia together with the bishops of the world, unless such a man is elected Pope, we're looking toward the most catastrophic events in human history to take place in the coming years.
And I want to thank you for all the research you've done, for coming to see us today in Rome. I know you're a busy guy, and I know you got to head back to Ireland, but thank you so much for being a part of our show today. And to you folks, we hope to see you soon on Impact North America. God bless you all. I'm Pete Dichter, and have a great day.